Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loki here. Join me today as we clean up a flower bed on the south side of my house. So let's go. This flower bed is about 11 feet by 12 feet in dimensions. So it's actually a pretty big size. And I figured together we could clean up this bed. And there are a lot of things that I want to tackle in here. So let me take you in and I'm going to show you what we're going to get done today. You can see here, this is where the driveway ends. I have some stone here. And then lining the front of this bed is a perennial geranium. I love that geranium, and it's my understanding that this kind of geranium can grow in full sun, part sun, and even shady conditions. And what we're going to do today is remove and pot up the geraniums from here. The reason is I want to put the geranium in other areas of my yard, and instead I want to pack this area full of sun-loving annuals. There are also some beautiful bleeding hearts, the fringe-leafed bleeding hearts. And you can see there's a white one there, and there's some pink ones over here. I love them. Those can take full sun, and they can even take shade. We're going to be digging up some of those as well. And again, for today, we're just going to be potting those up. Over here is a type of hydrangea. Unfortunately, I don't know the variety. Once it's blooming, maybe I'll have a better idea of what it is, and I can share that with you later in the season. But the plan is to kind of clean it up, especially at the base. Really, I want to have access to the base of it because there are a lot of leaves down below it, and it just needs to be cleaned up. So we're going to tackle that. This bed has some beautiful peonies in it, and for right now, the peonies are going to stay because they're happy there. I just need to clean at the base of them, the old debris from last year. There's leaf litter in here, lots of just general maintenance and cleanup work to be done. There are daffodils in here, and at a minimum, we need to just remove or deadhead the spent blossoms just to tidy those up. You can see that I started weeding here, but there's still a lot of weeding to be done. And also, I'll be edging where the lawn ends and where the flower bed begins, just along the perimeter here. Again, there's a ton of weeds, so it's really just a cleanup day and making this bed look a lot nicer. I have a beautiful clematis over here, and it really needs to be tied up along this support system here, or this trellis. So we'll be doing that as well, because you can see that it is butted up, but it really needs to just be supported along the trellis. Just like any project in the garden, we try to set realistic goals. And I think this is a realistic goal given the amount of time that I have for today. And once I get going in this project, there might be something else that needs to be addressed. And I will surely let you know if we find any other jobs that need to be done in this bed. But let's get started with working on this bed. I'm so excited to finally tackle this. I always like to have a plan of attack. And my plan of attack for this bed is to weed and clean from the front of the back and make my way towards the back of the bed. So I figured together we will just start weeding this area. And I'm just using, it's basically like a hand rake and taking the weeds out. Now I say the word weeds, but I am noticing in this area that yes, there are a lot of weeds, but then there are also some perennial seedlings. Now, if Mr. Budget Gardener was helping me do this project, I don't blame him. He would weed everything. But as you know, when you've been gardening for a number of years, you can tell the difference between a weed and a flower that's gone to seed. And I think this would probably drive him batty because it takes so long to clean a flower bed if I'm going to do what I plan on doing, which is leaving the seedlings behind of the perennials that I'm noticing. And on a rainy, cooler day, I will come back and I will dig those up and I will pot them up. One of the seedlings that I'm noticing in this bed are the fringe-leafed bleeding heart. And while I have quite a few of them, I'd love more. And I also know a number of people that have been stopping by from my backyard plant nursery are expressing an interest in them. So it's to my advantage to dig those up and pot those up. But I'm not going to do that today because that's just going to take more time. And also it's supposed to be close to 90 degrees Fahrenheit today and the next few days without any rain. So I'd rather do that job on a different day and today just focus on the tasks that we talked about. Okay, task number 1 is complete. So we've gone ahead and we've just weeded the stones, and up there I had used a half moon edger, and I had already edged over there, and I'll show you later in the video my process for edging the bed. But this looks nice and clean, and I'm going to show you some little seedlings that I'm going to leave behind for another day. They look like weeds, but trust me, they're not. They are little tiny seedlings of a perennial, and the perennial is the fringe-leafed bleeding heart, which is right next door over here. And they're either going to be the white ones or the pink ones. I'll leave them for a rainy day, and then I'll come back and I'll pot those guys up. Aren't they cute? Okay, the next step is going to be to remove these geraniums that are here. And I'm going to be potting them up because I don't know where they're going to go in my landscape. But if you were to remove some geraniums like I'm going to do, you could always move them to a different part of your landscape. And if we're able to, we'll divide some and I'll show you my process for that. So let's get going. I really love these geraniums. I think they're so pretty, and I realize that they're budded up. Some of them are actually just barely starting to bloom. It's probably not an optimal time to be doing this project, but I'm working on this bed today, so it's the best time for me to be doing it. And what we're going to be doing is we're just looking at the base here, and I'm going to attempt to dig these out just using a small hand shovel. And if I find that I need a bigger shovel, I can always use that as well. And whenever I dig up perennials, I don't like to dig right at the base. I don't want to ruin the root that's there. So we're going to dig out just a little bit from the base and get right under the plant. And the first thing I'm noticing is that they are coming out very easily. That tells me they have a fairly shallow root system to them. And I'm just removing some of the leaf litter that's at the base. But let's just keep on going. Don't you wish all perennials came out this easily? So what we're going to do now is we're just tugging. And wow, that is so simple. So you can see that the roots are not only shallow, but they basically go out like this. And so here's the root of this plant right here, and that's one plant. And what I'm going to be doing at this time when I'm digging these up is I'm also going to be cleaning them up. I'm going to be cutting off any old growth from last year because I never got around to that. And here's, you can see another plant is right here. And they're falling right apart when it comes to dividing, which is super nice. And it should be pretty simple, but I'm going to end up with a ton of pots. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take you in for a closer look just to show you my process for potting these guys up. Since I own a backyard plant nursery, I often get donations from people that buy plants from me for pots and for trays. So I love recycling those because otherwise they would just end up in the landfill. And I really like these bigger pots when I can use them because I don't know when I'm going to get to planting these plants in my landscape. So it's just nice to be able to let the plant grow in these pots. And then on a different day, we can go shopping in my plant nursery and collect these plants and then put them somewhere else in my landscape. I'm just using compost that I made myself, which is really nice because it's free to me, but you can always use some sort of compost that you've bought, like a bagged compost. We're going to start with filling this pot halfway. And again, because I'm late in cleaning up my geraniums, I'm doing them right now. And I'm just looking at the base right here. And I'm just coming in and I'm just clipping off any of the dead parts off my plant just to clean it up. You'll notice that when it comes to this geranium, it has roots in a couple of different areas. There are roots over here, there are roots over there. The key is you just want to make sure that your plant has some roots. And when it comes to potting this up, I don't want to have to deal with trying to pot up this whole piece right here. It would be too hard to put in a pot. So as long as I have some roots, the plant will be fine. So I'm going to cut right here and the plant will be okay and it'll just keep creating more roots. So I'm going to cut right there. I'm going to do that to a few more of my geraniums that I have, and then I'll show you my process for potting them up. I would say in this whole bed, this is the most tedious part of this project. But it's something that has been on my mind for a number of years. And I figured, what better day than today to tackle this? When I was new to gardening, I just wasn't sure, when it came to the roots of a plant, are you supposed to keep all of it? And what I've learned over time is as long as you have some roots on the plant, then it's fine and you can dispose of the rest of it. The same is true with the leaves. You don't need to keep all the leaves on your plant. If you want to remove some of those bottom leaves, you absolutely can. I'm just trying to figure out how many plants do I want to put in a pot. And I have a lot of plants to work with today. I think I'm going to do 5 plants per pot. I think 5 plants is a good amount for if I'm going to be selling the plant. And it's also a good amount if I want to put this somewhere else in my landscape. And that's where the root pruning comes into play. I would not be able to fit 5 plants in these little pots if I didn't trim the roots up a little bit. Now this one here has a funny root structure to it. And these are not roots. This is just old growth from last year. But you can see that there's a little bit of root right here. And then there's a ton of roots down here. So it's in 2 places, but most of the roots are down there. So I could go ahead and cut it right there if I wanted to. But what we're going to try to do today is I'll try to just fold this a little bit inside the pot, and we'll see how that works for us. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this 5th one. The key with getting these in a pot is just make sure that the roots are below the soil level and the greenery is above it. And you want to make sure you don't plant them too deep. With any perennial, including these ones, you want to make sure the crown is above soil level. And the same will hold true if you were going to plant this out in your landscape. So I'm just going to take the roots and I'm just kind of curling them around to get them to fit in this pot. And as with any plant, be it planting it in a pot or out in the landscape, you want to make sure that you give those plants a good drink of water. And in terms of these plants, since I'm planting them on a warm, hot, sunny day, and it's going to be warm, hot, sunny for a number of days, I'm actually going to be putting these in a shady area of my yard after I get them potted up. So I will water them well and put them in a shady area for a few days, for at least 2, if not 3 days, just so they can recover because they are undergoing stress right now. And that's it. And that's a beautiful plant right there that, again, I can shop my nursery on a later date and put these out in my landscape, or I can sell these. It's going to take me a while to dig all of these up and pot these up. So I'm going to just turn the camera off. I'm going to tackle this project and I will show you what it all looks like when I'm all done. It's the next day. It took me quite a while to dig up all the geranium from this area, but I'm so glad that I got it done. I don't know how long the geranium's been here, but I want to say I planted it at least 15 years ago. And since then, I never dug it out and divided it. Geranium typically wants to be divided every 3 to 5 years. So it was due to be divided, and I'm glad it got done. I have it all potted up, and I can't wait to put that geranium in other areas of my yard. Okay, so let's head over to my plant nursery, and I want to show you how much geranium was dug and potted up. Well, there they are. They're in these pots here, and I have well over 70 pots. And each pot holds between 3 to 5 plants. You do the math, there are a lot of geranium here, and I can't wait to put them somewhere else in my yard later this season. You'll notice right there, there's an irrigation line. And when Mr. Budget Gardener and I put irrigation in this whole bed here last year, we weren't able to add additional irrigation in here simply because it was populated with so many plants. The good news is we've opened it up now, so on a different day, we'll come in and we'll add a little bit more irrigation in here and get this planting area ready for some beautiful annuals. You'll notice there's a big clump of fringed bleeding heart over here, and there's another clump right over there. We're going to go in and dig up this clump of bleeding heart together. So I'm going to be very careful when digging up my bleeding heart. I know there are a bunch of plants in here, and I don't have a ton of this beautiful white bleeding heart around my landscape. So I want to make sure I'm very careful with this. So I can see the base is right there. So again, I don't want to dig right at the base. I'm going to dig just outside of the base. And you can see there are the roots, and it's quite possible some of the roots might have broken along the way, but as long as you get some roots with your plant, you should be fine. Now we've opened up this area, which is perfect. This is a great time for me to, again, go through this and just pull out any pieces of material that are dead from last year. I just didn't get around to cleaning up this bed earlier in the spring, and so now is a good time to just clean it up. I'm just pulling off any of the old material. And then I'm just taking my plant and I'm looking at it, and I can try to take off some of the excess dirt. And I'm trying to see good areas where I can divide it. So like right here, you can see that this is a geranium that was in there, and that's fine. This can get potted up and added to my geranium collection down below. Yet another geranium. And this is great because now I can make a nice pot of these geranium that we're pulling out. And I'm just very carefully trying to tug at the base here to see if there's an area where I can divide this fringe bleeding heart. And you can see there's a root right there. And at this point, this is one good big plant. It has a nice root. I don't want to divide it any further. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pot this up into a bigger size pot so that it can keep on growing. Let me first move this aside and let's look at our other section here. And I would say with this section here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pot up this plant into a big pot. And we turned one plant into two big plants, which is really nice. Bleeding hearts have a taproot system to them, and there are a number of plants that have a taproot. And you want to just be careful when it comes to those plants. They usually will recover, they usually won't die, but they might not look good the season that you dig them up. So just keep that in mind. My goal with this plant is basically to just limp it along and keep it alive. I may or may not plant it out in my landscape this year, I'm not sure. Unfortunately, I do still have some other white bleeding heart on either side of this bed, and I also have all those little seedlings. So this plant should be okay, but should it not survive, I do have more. I'll make sure I give it good water, and again, I'm going to put it in the shade. Just let it recover from the shock. A lot of times when you read about when's the best time to divide and move plants, many times it's going to be either early spring or later in the summer, like early fall. But as I mentioned earlier in this video, since I'm working on this bed right now, now is the best time for me to tackle this project. And I will take care of this plant and just let it recover from the shock and hopefully plant it somewhere else in my landscape later this season. It's just so pretty though. I really love this plant. And one thing I've learned about the fringe bleeding heart is not only does it bloom all season long, spring, summer, into the fall, as long as you deadhead it, but it takes shade, it takes sun. It's a very versatile plant. And because much of my yard is in the shade or part shade, very woodland-like, this plant just thrives and does really well. A lot of people comment and ask, why don't I just dig it up and move it somewhere else in my landscape? The thing is, I don't know where in my landscape I want this plant to go right now. And I used to do that. I used to feel like I had to dig something up and find a place for it right away. But the problem is, if you don't know what that right place is, you're just gonna have to dig it up again and move it. So I would prefer to dig it up once, and if I'm not sure where it's gonna go, pot it up, put it in a place, even if I didn't have a plant nursery, somewhere in my yard where it's shady, where I'm still gonna water it, not forget about it. And then when I'm ready, I'll have a plant ready to go somewhere in the landscape. So I'm going to water this and put this in the shade, and I'll show you what's next. Since we tackled the hardest part of this project, I would say, which was removing all of those geraniums, I figured why don't we tackle the easiest part of this project, which is I have a clematis that's at the base of this trellis, and it really needs to be hooked onto this trellis. It's trying to hook on, but it needs a little bit of our help. So I'm going to show you the clips that I plan on using today, and we're going to go ahead and pick up pieces of the clematis and just hook it on here. You can buy plant clips like these on Amazon and different places, local stores. I bought these a number of years ago at Christmas Tree Shop. You can see it was 20 clips for $2, which is a pretty decent price. So let's go ahead and remove one of these and I'll show you how they work. And these clips are just wonderful for not only plants like the clematis, but also tomato plants and anything that requires staking to basically clip something along a trellis or a fence, even peas, anything like that. So let's go in for a closer shot and I'll show you what we're going to do. So right here at the base, you can see that there are a bunch of runners that are coming off of this plant, and they really need our help. So I'm just trying to see an area where it's a little bit loose and I can take it and clip it onto the fence. So like here's a small piece right here. And you really can't go wrong when it comes to which piece to take to clip onto the fence. The key is just get it going, help it out, and eventually what it can do on its own then is it can go and attach itself to this fence after we've helped it a little. So I just clipped it right there just to get it off the ground because you can see that it's all budded up. It's going to be so beautiful, but it just needs to be taken off the ground. And if we do that, it will then naturally start climbing upwards. When it comes to what's the variety of this clematis, honestly, I don't know. I can tell you I did not buy it specialty anywhere because it would have probably been too expensive that way. I most likely bought it from a place like Ocean State Job Lot. A lot of times you can get them bare root for a very cheap price, either there or Walmart. I think even some of the big box stores are starting to sell clematis bare root. But it's so much cheaper to buy it that way than it is to buy it in a pot from a nursery. Although I'm all about supporting local nurseries, I just can't afford the prices that some of them charge for clematis. But of course, if you want a specialty one, you have to pay the price, right? But you'll see once this one's blooming how pretty this one is. Sometimes you can take multiple pieces and clip them together. So I'm going to try to do that. And I think that's good. I mean, it might not look the neatest, but the key is to get it off the ground and help it so it can keep on going. And this is also a good time if I'm noticing there are some dead pieces on here. I can use a clipper or try to just break it off like that. I have a number of clematis around my yard, and I just need to invest in buying more trellis pieces because the ones that I have are on the shorter side, and a lot of clematis prefer to be on a taller structure. And one thing I'm noticing about these clips is they're a larger size clip, so you might run into that and you might need to bunch a few pieces together to help it clip, or sometimes you can buy clips that are a smaller size. And optimally, you'd want to be doing this job early in the spring, and we are now mid-spring, but it's fine, it's all good. Better late than never is what I say with any gardening project. I'm really trying to just lift it up at this point. So I would say that is good enough for now. It helps the plant so it can just keep on climbing up this trellis. I'm going to show you what we're going to work on next. Now that we've raised the canopy of this clematis, we've actually exposed some area down below, and I'm noticing that there are a lot of leaves. So a lot of the maintenance work that needs to be done in this bed includes just cleaning up the leaf litter from the fall. So it's a good time to do this because I have mulch coming tomorrow, which I'm so excited about. I have not mulched my beds in a number of years. And the reason I have not mulched them for a long time is because I've spent the last many years top dressing them with compost that I've made myself. And I didn't want to bother with mulching them if I'm going to be composting on top. But now is the time. I want them to look tidy. I want them to look clean. I definitely want to suppress the weeds. And I feel like the soil structure is at a decent place in many of my flower beds. And as you know, a lot of the mulches do break down and turn into a form of compost, which is also nice. A lot of people that visit my backyard plant nursery inquire about the clematis. They ask if I'm selling it, and I usually say no. But I do want to research, how to propagate clematis. I believe you can take root cuttings from it as well as tip cuttings or stem cuttings. So that will be something I'm going to be experimenting with over the next year, because I want to be able to have more of this plant in my yard, and I also want to offer it as part of a plant that I can sell for my nursery. And as with any plant, you want to just make sure when you're propagating plants that they're not trademarked or have a patent. When it comes to clematis, there are a couple of different kinds, and based on the kind that you have, you would prune it a certain way or at a certain time of year. And what one of my goals is for this year is to figure out which kind of clematis I have in all the different areas of my yard, because I know that they need to be pruned. They all need to be pruned. And I want to make sure I'm pruning them at the right time of year. So when I show them in videos blooming, I would love your help just to help me identify the type of clematis that I have, because I never kept the labels. All right, I think that looks pretty good. There's a little bit more leaf litter on that side, and we'll get to it as we clean the rest of the bed. But otherwise, I think this looks very good. Things are looking good. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to move over towards this section over here, and I'm going to show you my process for edging the flower bed. I like to use this tool. It's called a half moon edger, and I know it's a very manual process, but I enjoy it. It's good exercise, and it gives a nice clean cut. Let me show you my process for how I use it. I basically make an area, I use my eyes basically, and I figure out where I want to make a cut. And many times when it comes to edging my flower beds, I don't want to cut a lot, but if I did want to make a bigger space, a bigger bed, I would come out even more and make a bigger cut. So I'm just going to line it up where I want it, and basically I'm going to push down and then lift. I'm going to move along, I'm going to push down, and sometimes you hit a rock. I hit a root or a rock, and that's okay. You make it work. And then you move along and you push down and you lift. So like right here is where we just cut. And I'm using a small metal hand rake. And I'm just lifting the area that we cut. And I like to keep the soil or the dirt because it is actually very good. I don't want to waste it. So I'm going to spend the time and I'm going to carefully just pound out the soil. Now, I have irrigation, and so the soil is pretty wet. And you can do this when the soil is wet or dry, it doesn't matter. And then when it comes to these pieces of grass, I like to put it in my compost pile. They'll break down over time. And if you have areas of your lawn where the grass is not growing, you can always take the grass. You don't have to pound out as much of the dirt like I am. And you can put this grass in other areas of your yard where the grass is not growing. It's kind of like recycling your grass. So I always like to share what my strategy is when tackling a bed, and what my thought process is. So I figured for right now, what I'm going to do is just edge the section that we're working on of this bed. And then when I'm done edging it, I'm basically going to move from this section of the bed that way. And I'll show you what the next steps are. All right, the edging is done. And I tried very hard to not keep on going because it was so easy to want to just keep on edging. But I did stop at that corner back there because, again, our goal is just to tackle this main bed in this whole section here. And trust you me, there is a lot to be done in this area. One thing worth mentioning is when it comes to edging, edging not only aesthetically makes a bed look nice, however, it's hard to tell right now because there's so much growth going on in here, but also it's important because when you think about it, if you don't edge and the grass starts to go to seed where the edges are, so let's say I'm mowing my lawn, but I can't reach in this area here with my mower, what's going to happen is the tall pieces are going to start to go to seed, and all those little seed pods of the grass will end up going into my flower bed. You want to avoid that at all costs. You don't want to have your grass go to seed in your flower bed. It's just a nightmare to have to pull out all that grass. So keep that in mind, why it's important to either edge your lawn at the edge of where the lawn ends and the flower beds begin, or why it's important to weed whack. So let's start heading in this way, and we're going to work our way into the bed. It's a jungle out there, trust me, but it's a good jungle. It's a beautiful jungle. Towards the front of this flower bed, I have a bunch of lungwort or pulmonaria. It is absolutely gorgeous, and it actually is almost done blooming. So it's important to prune this at this time or deadhead it. And the reason you want to do that is if you don't do it, what's going to happen is the stalks that have the blooms on it are going to turn brown and they're going to be unsightly. So you really want to keep that cleaned up. And also, you don't want this to go to seed, and you want it to put its energy into just becoming more beautiful as the season goes on. What happens is these spotted leaves actually get bigger and tougher. It's a really neat plant, and it typically loves shade, but this area gets, I would say, it's not full sun, but it's not full shade. So the plants do okay in this section of my garden. But anyway, I want to show you my process for cutting it back. So when I say cutting it back, I'm talking about just, again, following where we have blossoms here, and you want to just follow it down and cut back that stem. And what it will do is it's going to reflush and have new growth, and it's going to be even a more vigorous plant. And so I'm just going to go through and just keep cutting back the stems that had blossoms on them. It might seem harsh to do, and you might be wondering, why am I not just cutting at the tips here? I did some research, and in the past, I've never been good about doing this job, to be honest with you. But based on the research, I found that it said to follow it all the way down. So it might not look great for a while, but it will reflush and it will have a lot of new growth. And if you're not sure about this, at a minimum, what you could do is just cut the tips off. If that makes you feel better, you could just do that. And I might do that for a few of them just to experiment, because like I said, I have never done this to my pulmonaria. And what I'll find is if I find certain pieces are turning brown, those pieces are probably pieces that had blossoms at the tips. So I'll come back in here and clean it up at that time. But I do want to just go in here and cut off the blossoms. So again, with some of them, I'll just cut off the tips and I'll see what happens. And then with some of them, I'm going to follow them all the way down. And as always, I will definitely keep you updated and posted in future videos and let you know my findings and what's the best method when it comes to pruning a plant like this. So I changed it up for the next one, and I cut it back by, I would say, 2/3. And I left a little bit more of the foliage at the base there. So you really can do whatever you're comfortable with, but I wanted to show you a couple of different methods. Towards the front here, there's just going to be a lot of weeding that's going to be going on. There are different perennials in here that I need to leave, but I'm going to be working in all of these spaces and just weeding them out. And one thing that I wanted to mention was I do have daffodils in here. You can see there's daffodils there, and then there's a bunch of daffodils in there. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be cutting them back. You want to wait to cut back your daffodils for at least 6 weeks after they're done blooming. And it's been about 5.5 weeks. So at this point, I feel comfortable cutting them back. I feel that the bulbs for the daffodils have stored up enough energy for next year. So I will be cutting them all the way down to the ground. And then also in here, there's some bloodroot. And I will be cutting the bloodroot back as well. So I'll just take you in for a close look so you can see my process for basically just cutting back the daffodils. And I will go to town and I will cut back all the daffodils that are in this bed, which there are a ton in this bed. It truly is a simple process when it comes to cutting back your daffodils. You just want to hold the leaves like that and just cut at the base. You absolutely can leave the leaves there and let them brown on their own and die back. But my experience has been as long as I wait 6 weeks, it's okay then to go ahead and cut them back. Okay, so the task at hand is cut back all the daffodils that are in this bed, as well as any weeds that I find, pull the weeds. It's going to take me a while, so I don't feel it's necessary to show you my process for doing all of that, but it's important for me to tell you what the plan is. So let me get working on that next. Okay, we're making slow and steady progress. So again, that's the Pulmonaria. I have some Rebecca or Black-Eyed Susan, and you can see it's been weeded in this area here. Over there, that's the Great Blue Lobelia. And that right there is purple coneflower or echinacea. And there's a big clump of purple coneflower echinacea over there. Right here is a rose, and I want to take you in for a closer look. There's just some dead wood on there that I'm going to be cutting back, and I figured I could show you my process. So there's definitely old wood on here that can be removed at this time, and it could have been removed a while ago, to be honest with you. And I'm just following it all the way down to the base for the simple reason that there is no new green growth on here. There's a piece right here that can be taken out. It's really just a matter of cleaning this up so aesthetically it looks nice. And that's pretty much it. We just had to cut out some of the old growth that was in here, and that way the bush looks nicer, the rose bush. I wanted to show you a different angle of this bed, and you can see it really is jam-packed with a lot of plant material. I would want to take you in for a closer look with this whole project, but honestly, it's so hard to get the right angle shots. That's why I'm just taking you in for small bits and pieces. But you can see right there, there are a bunch of daffodils, and once I cut those back, it will at least give me a little bit of access into here, and we will see how we make out. So I'm going to keep on weeding and cutting things back. And speaking of weeding, in certain areas, the weeds are thick. You can see that. So it's going to be so nice to get this cleaned up. Something else that I'm doing today is cutting back my bloodroot, at least in this bed. The reason is eventually this plant is going to go, basically it's going to die back. It's an ephemeral plant. Ephemeral means once it's done blooming and it puts a little bit of energy to the roots for next year, the plant will fully die back. So at this point, I feel comfortable cutting it back. And I know in previous years, I've cut it back before it naturally died on its own, and it's been fine. And you'll see that there's a seed pod here. I could leave that. I often do because I do want the plant to scatter its seeds everywhere. So I'm going to leave that there. And the reason I like to show that is because I think it's important to know that you don't have to necessarily fully wait all the time for plants to die back. They will be fine. They will come back next year. I know it because I've done it. But if you want to leave it and let daffodils and bloodroot die back naturally on their own, you absolutely can do that as well. But I have mulch that's going to be coming that I'm going to be putting in this bed. And I also want access points in this bed so I can easily weed. So it's a good day for me to be cutting back certain plants like the ones I'm showing you. The goal has been achieved and this flower bed has been cleaned up. Look how beautiful it looks. I really tackled the weeds and just cut back any perennials that needed to be cut back at this time. And now this bed is definitely ready for me to put mulch in here. And it's just going to look so pretty when the mulch is added. Let me take you around so you can just take a peek at different angles of this bed. And you can see that I've basically opened it up so I can easily access around it. This is where we had started our project. And again, I plan on adding irrigation in here and a bunch of beautiful annuals that will provide color all season long. And notice right in there, there are no more leaves, no more weeds. It's all been cleaned up. It's all tidy now. Here's the clematis that we tied up, and we tidied at the base of it as well. And just behind the clematis, this is the other side of where those peonies are and the irrigation line that's exposed. So it's nice because now I actually have access in here. So I can just work around here, add mulch, and weed as needed. And that's very important. You want to be able to access your bed from different angles. Speaking of accessing the bed, right here is a huge hydrangea, and I really can't get under it. I just don't want to cut back all this growth this time of the year. So I'm going to wait until the fall time. I'm going to come in here, and I'm really going to be cleaning up the base of this plant here because there are a ton of leaves still under here. There are daffodils that need to be cut back. But I decided for today's project, I'm going to leave it as is because you can see it is a very, very overgrown hydrangea. So I don't want to touch it for now. But what I did do was I came in here and I just cut back the blossoms from last year just to tidy it up a little bit. This is the back side of the bed. And honestly, there really wasn't much to do in terms of maintenance on this side, which was kind of nice. So I just left it as is. And you can see that there's a huge bleeding heart right there that is in its glory and is blooming right now. Let me take you on the other side of the bed here. This is where a lot of the work was done in terms of edging, weeding, cutting back different perennials, and basically, again, opening it up so that it's tidier and it can take the mulch when I need to move around in there and put mulch in there. Just a different angle. Again, the peonies are over here, and then over there was the clematis. And speaking of clematis, there's another one right over here. I'm going to take you in for a closer look. The only thing I did with this clematis was clean up the base of it. And it has a very short trellis. It's not tall at all. And my goal is to find a taller trellis because it absolutely needs to be much taller than this. So for right now, you can see it is budded up. But over time, I would love to get another trellis just as tall as the one that's down in this corner here. And here is just like a different angle of this bed. And you can see my Miss Kim lilac is blooming. And at the base of the bleeding heart here, this whole area here has been cleaned up and weeded. And what's super nice is, again, I can come in here and I can walk around and I can just basically weed. And that's key. I need to be able to walk in here and weed. So I'm glad I'm able to do that now. Now keep in mind, this bed that we cleaned up together right here, from the front all the way towards the back that way, this bed is a large area. It extends all the way down this way. But I think it's so important to set realistic goals for yourself and chunk it out and then just get after it and tackle it. And that's exactly what I did in this area here. And boy, I am so happy. I'm so happy, in fact, I'm motivated to keep on going this way. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it motivated you to get out there and get weeding and cutting back perennials and moving perennials around. Just get out there and garden. It's the best feeling in the world. And I'm motivated, I can tell you that. Tell me, what are you doing out in your gardens right now? I'd love to hear from you. Please drop a comment down in the comment section below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.